Hi, Robert. Excited to bring you here to our partnership program, First Payload. I'm really excited to hear the story of the company and what you have under the hoods and what are you bringing to the market. So yeah, please introduce yourself a bit, introduce the company, and let's start the conversation.
Excellent. Pleasure to be here this morning with you, Andre. Thank you for having me here on this session. We are very excited to start a partnership with Precious Payload. I think we have a lot of respect for the things you've done over the past few years in building a very, very credible, very strong platform for connecting the end customers with the launch partners. And so I think that's a very, very good, useful tool. I'll tell you just a couple of words about myself. I've been in the satellite and space industry for about 30 years now. Spent almost 2 decades in Europe, working with big guys like SES Global in Luxembourg, and then Eutelsat in France and Italy. I was the CEO of SkyLogic, the founding CEO of SkyLogic in Italy as well. And then came back to the States, worked with Elon, SpaceX, Space Systems L'Oreal. And now I have obviously my role here at Maritime Launch is to make sure that we can build upon where it's already starting to get built here in Canada, build an infrastructure there that will be serving Canada from Canada to the rest of the world. And so I'm very excited. I'll tell you a little bit about some of the relationships that I built over the time with the team there in Canada as well. And so I'm based in DC, in Washington. And very happy to be here this morning with you and chat a little bit about what we can do.
Awesome. Exciting. Yeah, 30 years in the market is almost exactly the time that I've spent on this planet. I'm 33. So
I know, right? I'm aging myself, Andre.
Yeah.
I know.
All right. Tell me about, because, in this virtual room, I had the privilege to talk to a lot of rocket manufacturers, right? The launch vehicle manufacturers that their core business is, building the actual launch vehicle and talking about the propulsion systems and how excited they are about their engines and hardware. But with you, it's different. So tell me what Maritime Launch Services is and what's your core business model?
Well, first of all, we as a company, we really want to build out really the first and only commercial spaceport in Canada, which it will be based in Nova Scotia, right? And our intention is, of course, through this process to build and grow the Canada aerospace sector for the industry, and servicing, of course, the entire global industry that needs launch activity, launch partners. For us, the important thing is to understand that in our model, and we can talk a little bit about how we got here in the beginning, but in our model, we don't purport ourselves as being just a rocket partner for rocket operators that come to our property and launch from there and then leave and go back, right? For us, really the model is what we call a white label model is that we, for the most part of the launches with our launch partners, we bring our partner over, we buy the rocket ourselves, we operate it as a maritime launch, not as a partner launch from whatever the brand is of the rocket that we're using. So we're a multi-vehicle launch spaceport. That's our ultimate goal. And through that process, then we have I think an interesting model for the rocket operators, because we're diversifying the launch sites they can launch from. And we're also looking for the customers ourselves, right? Which is it's sort of a win-win for them, and that's a different model, I think, that's gotten very, very good acceptance in the marketplace. We've made public 2 relationships that we already have. We're of course working on a couple others, but it's really gotten, I think, the attention of some of the international rocket community and saying, wait a minute, there's something special here in Nova Scotia. One of the real differentiators we have in Nova Scotia is the fact that we're in the northeastern tip of North America, basically, which gives us over the ocean access to the largest range of inclinations, 45 degrees to 98 degrees from this one location, right? And there's no other place in Northern America that gives you that range of inclination, especially all over the ocean. All the drop zones are in the ocean, right? So it's a very, very interesting proposition, and one that I'm very happy to say it's quite a bit of traction with the different rocket system manufacturers and operators that we're talking to.
Right. So in the value chain of the taking the satellite, like the customer satellites to space, you would be busy with actually sourcing and aggregating the demands for the launches, you would be actually acquiring the actual rockets, shipping them to the launch pad that you are in charge of, and then providing, I imagine, the integration services on site to do the integration of the customer payloads to the launch vehicle that you procured and operate. Is that correct?
All of those are correct, except maybe the last one. On the integration side, obviously we would integrate the adapter and the payload into pairing and so forth. But to do actual testing and integration of the payloads themselves, we obviously could do part of that locally there in Canada. We do have some other sites that we're looking at to do that integration and that pre-testing of the actual payloads themselves and vibration tests and other kind of things that some customers want with another party. And so those relationships we have to put together ourselves to make it the easiest way for the customer to do that, right? So all those points are correct except for the very last one, where some of that might be done locally, some of that will be done by a third party in a different location.
Got it. And of course, to add to the mix, the big part of making sure that the customer launches on time is helping them to get the launch license. So I imagine, with Canadian governments, where the ability to launch the external, I would say, foreign payloads from the Canadian soil is something that has not been done before in Canada. So how does that work? Like, do you have already the existing relationship with the Canadian government? Would you be helping the foreign customers to get the launch license?
Absolutely. We're responsible, of course, for obtaining the actual launch license ourselves through the relationship with the Transport Canada. Transport Canada is the regulator in this particular case, and NAV Canada, obviously, for the frequencies. But and those would have to be done directly by the satellite operators with NAV Canada. But Transport Canada is a relationship that we work with. We would obtain a launch license. We're working with very closely with them to use some of the best practices in the launch type of licenses that are being talked to internationally. In particular, some of those that are now being pushed in North America or in the United States through the Part 450 program, right, for the multiple launch license. And so that's kind of the direction we've been going to with them, working very closely, of course, so that when we do the very, very first launches next year, 2023, we'll have a sounding rocket launch in 2023. So probably happen around the middle of the year. This is going to be a very simple up and down launch, just so we can get the whole regulatory community happy in Canada and understand how it works and get the launch window clearance and all the rest of the stuff. Then from that point on, we would work with Transport Canada towards the end of the year of 2023 or beginning of the year after 24 for an orbital launch, and that would be with another partner that we have right now. We've been talking to Skyrora from Scotland, and with them, our goal is to have something towards the latter part of the year or beginning of the year after to do an actual orbital launch. Again, in that case, we would be responsible for obtaining the launch clearance and working for the launch license in that particular mission as well.
Very good. You brought a very good example of the Skyrora. So from a customer perspective, if the customer is looking for a certain inclination or the certain time frame for their mission, would they go to, like, what's the difference between them, for example, going directly to Skyrora or going through Maritime? Would there be like exclusivity for you in your white label model to market the launches from Nova Scotia of the same launch vehicle that Skyrora is launching from Scotland, or how's it going to work?
That's a very, very interesting and a very perceptive question, because obviously that's an issue that we're starting to talk about now as we try to figure out the why yeses and why nots of certain ways of dealing with the customer, because obviously some customers will want to launch from one side or another, depending on maybe political things. Maybe they want to launch out of Europe instead of launching out of Canada. But in order to have some sort of a workable model, we can't have a big price delta from one side to the other, right? I mean, the price has to be similar from either side. Commercial approach to the customer, the actual satellite customer or the payload customer, has to be understood as well. Some customers will absolutely want to launch only from Canada. In that case, we could interface with them. But those details of how we approach the customer and the commercial approach and I guess division, if you want to call it, of how we deal with certain customers coming to both of us have to be done in a proper way. And I've been doing this my whole life, so I understand how we can make it a win and a workable solution. But it's a very perceptive question because obviously it's going to come up over and over again, right? And you don't want to have a customer getting, $5 less or $50 less per kilogram in one place, and then maybe trying to negotiate with the other party for the same launch somewhere else, so that doesn't work very well, so we understand that still has to be worked out in the details, Andre, but we're going to get there.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking this question is because like the notion that we are pushing to the markets to educate them is we think that as of 2022, the price tag on the actual launch contract is important, but it's not as important as the hidden costs of managing launch campaign, right? That's where if your launch contract is $150,000, then the cost of logistics of sending the engineering team for integration, doing the testing, sending the payloads, or even like another angle of managing the launch campaign over like a dozen of months across different time zones actually can represent up to 50% of the launch cost. So it's less important to like trade for 5-7% of like the cost of the actual launch, but rather look at the entirety of the launch campaign management. And that's where we see a lot of like a big push towards both like non-US launch services, but because for a lot of our international customers, it's prohibitively costly for them to send engineers to the United States because of the visas issue, because of the cost of travel there, of the time zones, and it's much easier for them to go to Canada, for example. That's where we see the market potential for such a service. But yeah, since you started talking about the customers, where do you see the biggest markets for you down the road in the next like 2 to 5 years?
We believe that it's important for us to have a very, very solid footprint in North America. North America is a very buoyant market. Lots of players, lots of manufacturers, lots of customers, potential customers, and that's fueling a lot of the global growth in the satellite and the satellites to be launched for the next 10 years, quite honestly. But we also see a lot of activity coming from Europe, and what you said is very important, Andre, because a lot of customers, all those hidden costs of getting the frequencies and trying to get the right payloads integrated and so forth, and going back and forth with engineers. It's a definite cost for companies that are working to launch something, right? So in that case, I would see that there are quite a few European companies that are manufacturing satellites as well, and quite a few companies launching their own constellations in Europe. So those customers will tend to gravitate more to, we want to send some engineers to Scotland, so some engineers somewhere in Europe for testing, and not having to travel to the United States. A lot more convenient for them. So in that case, they might elect to have a launch take place out of Europe and interface with Europeans, and that works perfectly fine. From our perspective here in the US, of course, it's a big market, lots of customers, and so having this office here in the United States gives us that proximity to the customer. And of course, Nova Scotia is just up the road for us here, so it makes it very, very good place for us to work with North American type of clients that want to get their operations going. But yeah, you're very, very right. I mean, cost wise, it's not just price per kilo. It's all the other things that come up to define what actually will cost a customer at the end for the launch campaign. So it's a very, very, very valid point you say there, for sure.
Yeah, I was also wanting to add that I've looked into the unit economics from the launch provider perspective, from rocket manufacturer perspective, the unit economics of setting up the launch operations for Guyane, and it's prohibitively expensive. Like the cost of maintaining launch sites in South America on the French soil there, it's super expensive, and it adds to that price per kilo cost. And so I definitely see also the potential for even European rocket manufacturers that eyeing the like American market to also be the one of your potential launch partners? Because again, I assume that the cost of launch operations from Nova Scotia would be less than what we see in Alcantara or in French Guiana in South America.
We believe so. And of course, logistics is a big part of that, Andre, right? Not only from shipping units back and forth, but people and getting people over to all those remote locations. Yeah, it all adds up at the end of the day, right? I mean, we talked a little bit about our model, our Whitelabel model. When we're working with international rocket operators and manufacturers, of course, when we work with the European ones, we're not going to have those ITAR issues that we would have if we were working with US ones. In the case of the US, we would say, all right, we bring our team, we do a Whitelabel model, let's say, with a US operator, but they would have to have the touch labor themselves, bring their teams with the touch labor because of the ITAR reasons, right? So all those things are very, very important things to keep in consideration when you're working with these, in the international community. But yeah, I think Canada will be very easy, especially for Europe. It'll be very, very easy for a lot of our customers to work with. And we believe we're in a very good position to do that. We have a lot of support for not only from the political sort of backup from Canada, and we're not financed by the government, of course, but we have a lot of political goodwill that they really want this to happen. And we're so close to the U.S. market as well that it makes it very good sense for us to consider, do we, you mentioned earlier before, do we do integration and testing of the payloads in the US? Yeah, why not? We can do that. And then ship the whole sort of tested unit back to Canada for launch, right? We want to make it as easy as possible. So some of that in Canada, but we can certainly do that in the United States and then ship the whole tested payload to the US. Make it as easy as possible for our customers, right?
Yeah. Talk to me as well about the midterm strategy. How many launch partners do you want eventually to have? And, what does the infrastructure on the ground allow you to go for? Like multiple launch pads, like, I don't know, 5, 7 different launch companies? What the future looks like from that standpoint?
Yeah, that would be a little bit overly ambitious, 5, 7. But we're currently obviously our big partner, and we hope that everything goes fine and it works well with the Cyclone-4M launcher from Ukraine. That is our medium class launcher, the 5-ton payload to LEO capable vehicle. We're still working very closely with them, and they would be. We're looking at probably very, very end 24 or early 25 for the first launch with them. So that's going to be sort of our cheval de bataille, as you say in French, the workhorse for the constellation market, right? Having said that, of course, it's a situation where it's the war is still taking place there, and it's the difficult situation for our good friends there. But at the very, very at least, I think we would be very comfortable with about 3 launch partners, maybe 4. The smaller rocket delivery type of vehicles need a lot of less infrastructure. They don't need the big, complete launch pad infrastructure they would have for a 5-ton capable vehicle, similar to that what you would see for Antares at Wallops, for example. That would be very similar look. For the smaller rocket operators, a lot of them are operating sort of on a containerized kind of solution where they bring everything in containers. They have a transporter erector. Some of them have a small flame trench even that they bring with them. So it's a very, very simple infrastructure from the point of view of our support. Of course, good road access, cement, comms, launch vehicle tracking, those kind of things we would provide. But it would be a lot simpler model because they would bring everything in containers. So we don't need to have a very sophisticated launch pad infrastructure for those type of smaller rocket operators because they're designing them from scratch to be modular and easy to transport from place to place, right? And so that's a good thing for us, of course, because it makes it easier for us. But yeah, certainly having 3 launch pads, maybe 4, is I think ambitious enough goal for us. Maybe it grows faster, and then we'll have to talk to our partners there about increasing more launches. But for the time being, I think that's an ambitious enough goal, is to have about a 3 good partners would be just the right mix, I think, for the time being anyway.
How many launches per year do you think you can operate from this launch site?
Well, we have currently, and this is public information, we have an agreement for 12 launches per year right now, right? And
That's good
that
enough.
gives us some flexibility already, as you can see, to make, the kinds of launch operators. And this is 12
Yep.
launches per year for the medium class launcher, right? Which full hypergolic upper stages and the whole thing. So anything smaller than that is a lot easier, of course, to manage. But that's already a good figure, 12 launches per year. I think for us, we're not going to be saying that we're launching once per day or once per week or anything like that. No, that's not our plan today.
Very good. I really strongly believe that as the constellation market matures and the space industry enters the commercialization phase for a lot of these emerging satellite operators, I really think that the supply chain for those constellations really needs to adopt the tiered approach, where, for example, you have companies like Ursa Major, whose business model is to supply the engines for the emerging launch operators. You also see like Firefly now providing the hardware for Antares instead of the Russian engines. And I really believe that what you are doing is a really good model for this tiered approach, where you have companies focusing on building the launch vehicles, and you have companies that are focusing on spaceports, like providing the launch facility, in addition to solving the aggregation problem and actually like getting the demand on board to fill the capacities at those launch vehicles. So I really believe that like the more of such complexity exists in the market in a good way, the more flexibility it brings to the emerging satellite operators in planning their missions and designing even more robust constellations for their business models.
Correct, absolutely, and you see, you're very, very right, Andre. You see some of the rocket operators already going much further and deeper into the value chain. We've seen this with Rocket Labs. I think 60% of their business last year came from other services other than launch. Yes. Firefly already has been doing that for quite a while. Recently, SpaceX also announced their government division. Well, guess what? Government division means, and they want to do a lot of other things other than just operate satellites for them. They want to integrate payloads into their satellites, integrate instruments into their satellites, design satellites for them. So now they're starting to go down the value chain on designing and operating satellites for other customers as well. Spire has been doing it for a long time, integrating payloads, small payloads into their satellite constellation. So yeah, I think a lot of them are going down eastwards, westwards, or up or down the value chain, to offer more value to the customer. But ultimately, it makes things easier for the constellation operators, because we're seeing them now saying, wait a minute, why should we design everything from scratch? Let's bring the people that know this stuff and can do it well and do it a lot of it. And then let's put those guys together so we can get a better, cheaper, and more efficient mission, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, I wish that idea on focusing on only the things that, how do they say that, that makes your beer taste better would be ingested in a lot of early stage founders these days, because I see a lot of companies trying to rework the existing concepts just because they can, or they think they can, rather than utilizing the capacity that already exists in the market. So true.
Yeah, we fully believe that. And I've been in the business for a while, and Steve Mateer, this is the founder of Maritime Launch in Canada, has been in the business a while as well. He's seen good practices and not so good practices, and we've seen what seems to work best and not. We don't want to invent everything from scratch. Why should we, right? So hiring out the teams that bring propellant storage, hiring out the teams that do comms, hiring out the teams that do all the different security and maintenance for the launch facility. All those things are important for us to do, but we don't have. It doesn't have to be our own employees 100%. That's the kind of additional work functions that are easy to farm out to companies that know to do that very, very well, right? And some of them are expressing some interest to come to Nova Scotia, put actual structure in Nova Scotia as well, because they're seeing a good possibility there for them to do a lot of certain things they want to do in addition to helping us with the launch, right? So it's a good formula for us. I think it's working well.
Yeah, very good, Robert. I'm really excited to work together with you coming the next year, and really looking forward to bring the customers to all your upcoming launches down the road. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andre. I really appreciate the time you give us today. And then, and again, congratulations on what you're doing there. We're very happy and excited about our partnership with Precious Payloads. So thank you for the few minutes this morning. I appreciate it.